Former NYPD officer Mike Gould is with us. Mike, I want to ask you about this firearm. Police sources have let reporters know that it was a 9mm pistol that resembled a gun that farmers would use to put down animals. We don't know if police have recovered the actual gun itself, but what does that type of a weapon say to you, if anything, about the crime?
Right. Well, I will tell you it's very rare. Frankly, I don't know that much about it, nor do a lot of experts know quite a bit about it. But the fact is, if that's what he had in his bag, that's a little bit worse for him, right? Because it's not just any 9mm. It's a very specific and unusual one that only the killer would have. But as far as the escape plan, yeah, he did a tremendous amount of planning. There's no doubt about it. But there's no perfect crime. So you can't account for every eventuality. Having a cup of coffee, you're not thinking. I guess people don't realize it, and we forget ourselves, right? I was in Manhattan yesterday. From the moment I drove through the Midtown Tunnel, I am under surveillance. Anywhere from 14th Street all the way up to Central Park, east, west, my car would be seen parking, the parking spot I parked in. So the average person, you can't think of those things. Every bus, the taxi cab he's in, he's being recorded. It's hard for anybody to comprehend that. So there's no perfect crime. It was just a matter of the amount of law enforcement resources that they could find out his mistakes, and they found them pretty quickly. So yeah, so as far as that gun is concerned, it is a one-off. I know they use it for killing animals, and they don't like the noise. The crackle of the gun will scare a lot of other animals. So that's what it's a very specific use for it. And he was very familiar with it, and he was calm. He was relaxed. So it was probably rehearsed. It reminds me of Taxi Driver, the Robert De Niro movie, where Travis used to practice in the mirror shooting people. And it was kind of the same kind of tendencies this guy had. He was very relaxed. But a real organized crime hit, it would have been at close range. He would have came right up behind with a revolver and, fired a couple of rounds into the victim's head. This took a lot to be 20 feet away, and he was very calm and casual. So, yeah.
To that point, no matter.
Yeah, definitely. So for those of you who are old enough to remember the Son of Sam killing back in the 70s, this has kind of similar, in New York City, and I've been kind of accused of being desensitized to this issue, but this is a homicide. There's 500 homicides a year in New York City. When I was active on the NYPD, there was 2,000 homicides a year. So I don't want to say this is just another day in the big city, but it kind of is. And rarely do you have this kind of evidence in any homicide case. As I said, you have a smoking gun video, and then you're going to have all the circumstantial evidence that's going to put this guy at the scene. So whether he talks or not talk, he doesn't have to talk, I don't think. I think there's going to be an overwhelming amount of evidence, and he doesn't have to say anything. I mean, really, once the experts start putting together and identifying that backpack and his clothing, it adds up to beyond a reasonable doubt. Again, my prediction is this is.
But is he the kind of guy that, in your experience, that might want to talk, might want to take the floor and say X, Y, and Z?
Absolutely. As I said, David Berkowitz, the Son of Sam, this was his whole life. He killed a certain amount of women. He'd go out at night. He'd leave tips for the news media. And that was his game. It was the cat and mouse game. He was a narcissist that thought he was smarter than the police. This guy did too. He thought he was smarter than the police, but what he didn't realize that he was going to be on an international manhunt after he shot. He thought he was going to shoot this guy, go up to the park. He had a well-planned, in his mind, it was well-thought-out plan. But he didn't know that this homicide, which kind of surprised me, is turning into an international manhunt. That doesn't happen. There's going to be 5 people were murdered in New York City since this executive was killed. Nobody's going through the swamp or the lakes in Central Park looking for any other homicide that takes place. And again, we talk about this 2-tier justice system, and there is some outcry of that here on the ground from residents. If the resources wouldn't be applied, but this is a public relations thing. You got a new mayor, new police commissioner. It's the biggest holiday season in New York City. So they're putting all their resources in it. But the average homicide victim, you're not going to get any of this, none of this. So whether it's right or wrong is debatable. But there is public sentiment about that, the two-tier justice system that wouldn't happen for the average person. So that's just something that has to be taken into consideration.
Obviously, he got there via bus originally out of Atlanta, Georgia. Still with us, criminal defense attorney and civil attorney Amanda Montgomery and former NYPD officer Mike Gould. And Mike, of all the things that we're now learning, and we're assuming that they are accurate, is multiple sources saying to multiple media outlets, at the end of the day, there could be a portion of this that comes out to be inaccurate. However, there seems to be, because of the avalanche of reporting, that there is a there. What stands out to you as the most significant bit of information that we have at this point?
Right. So obviously the manifesto, so to speak, he's got a 2-page document. You know, like I said, you can't be 100%. I'm 99.9%. The NYPD, as I said earlier, they had a lot of intelligence that they weren't releasing necessarily. They can't tip their hand to the media always. Media, of course, plays a great role in probably finding this person, but they have to, as I said, kind of spoon feed information, withhold information. There's been cases in the past where they give out misinformation, you know, if the case warrants it, to mislead the suspect who's probably on social media, if he had his laptop computer. So the manifesto, the bullets, the monopoly money in the bag, this person was, you know, he had a grievance towards insurance or corporate greed, one of the two, or the same, whatever it was. And a lot of people are angry at that. But I think it's pretty much will be an open and closed. You'll find out the details, where he lived and other things, and certainly, well, you know, what his motives were specifically. But I think that as far as evidence is concerned, they've had an abundance of evidence from day one. And again, it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game. We think that, you know, 8 million people in the city, it's still as much digital evidence you have. It's just not that easy. You could know who he is, and I think they had a pretty good idea about who he was. But finding him is a little bit of a different story. There's a big delta between the two, knowing who they are and finding him.
And we still don't have a name. We have face. The NYPD put out those new pictures of him with the mask, but we don't have a name that's been released of this person who has been questioned.
And Mike, let's face it, if this ID is the same ID that was presented to the hostel on the Upper West Side, it is, to your point, it's an open and shut, but what about the motive? And from an investigative standpoint, how important is that? And do you think, from what you've seen, do you think this is a lone wolf, or do you think this individual had some help, possibly?
Yeah, so I agree with Amanda. Look, it's two possibilities, right? It's either individually targeting this specific guy, or it's a statement or a potential serial killer where he was in Pennsylvania to maybe assassinate another figure. There's been a lot of political rhetoric about healthcare on both sides of the aisle, corporate greed on both sides of the aisle. So you have a lot of crazy people out there on social media, as we know. So my guess is, based on the bullets, and I don't, people know him. He's not a lone wolf in the sense that he's just operating independently. He has friends. As you were talking about the reward, I thought $10,000 was nothing. $50,000 was nothing, considering that company could have put $1 million reward. And that's what's going to bring people out of the woodwork, money. So I'm almost certain it'll be revealed somebody gave him up. I mean, obviously, the NYPD does great investigative work, and they're one of the biggest. They have the long arm of the law. They can go anywhere, bigger than the FBI in some instances. So I personally think with the bullet casings, I think he had a bigger motive than just personal one-on-one. I think that it's going to be, you're going to find that there's a bigger, more expanded motive than that, either prompted by social media, and he's just like a vigilante trying to make things right for the world.
We all know these detectives want to know all of the details, and the word that we're getting into our newsroom is that the NYPD is sending detectives to Pennsylvania to question this person. So, Mike, my question is this a situation, typically, protocol-wise, where the detectives or law enforcement that detain this person for questioning, that they wouldn't actually do the questioning, that they would wait for the detective team, or would they go forward?
Absolutely. They should just detain him, let the NYPD, who have all the facts. This is something that's critical. A bad investigation, proper Miranda warnings, and even just the experience. I mean, I'm not taking away from where he is. I don't know where he is, somewhere in Pennsylvania. Leave the NYPD to handle it. They're the ones that started this. They have all the information. So, yeah, they should just hold him. NYPD will be there very quickly, believe me.
233 miles.
I think you're going to.
Yeah, now we had heard
maybe by helicopter.
Yeah, we have heard that some of the detectives were in the Atlanta, Georgia area, that they had moved a few, deployed them there because of some leads out of the Georgia. Of course, we know that the individual took a Greyhound bus out of Atlanta to get to New York in the first place, but those folks are all on their way. Mike Gould is, I believe, also with us, former NYPD officer on the phone. And we got a Skype. Excellent. Mike, this is huge. This break, and you know, let's face it, a lot of people thought this was probably going to happen Friday or Saturday, or it was getting to that point where it's like, wow, I can't believe this guy's still out there on the lam. But if these reports are true, this is the big break. What stands out to you at this point as the most significant part of the puzzle that may have been solved?
You have the suspect. So I think there's an abundance of evidence that will be connected to him. I mean, we literally have, I know he wasn't, his face wasn't on it, but we have a smoking gun assassination of this figure that's there. And then there's so much circumstantial evidence that will tie him in. If this is the suspect, which I'm certain it is, there's no pretty certain about that. So it's going to be a closed case. Of course, they have enough to prosecute the evidence just on all the things that they've been providing, the timelines, all of it, the taxi cab, his clothing, the stitching on his clothing can be identified. So I think this is, and of course, you know, as you said, this is always a little cat and mouse game with any criminals. Just knowing the suspect and finding them are two different things. My thoughts always were NYPD had a lot more information that they were revealing, which is necessary. They can't just, they have to spoon feed the media. They can't give away every bit of evidence they know. So I think they were ahead of this guy. You know, there's talks he was down in Atlanta. So I think it's from my opinion, open and shut case once they put all this circumstantial evidence together, if in fact they got the right guy, which I'm assuming they do.